Good evening. My name's Tim Maloney. I'm with the Hoosier Environmental Council, and I'm going to talk to you tonight about the fact that there is an alternative to the Mounds Reservoir to damming and flooding the White River Valley, and that's the idea that we call the Mounds Greenway. And this is an idea that we worked on with Heart of the River and some other folks in Muncie and Anderson to conceptualize this idea. So tonight I'm going to talk about more details about the Greenway proposal itself. Then I'll talk about greenways and trails generally and across the country, how they're being used as a sustainable way to revitalize communities, and then talk about what's next for the possibility of making the Mounds Greenway happen. This is a very generic map of the Greenway proposal, which would run from Muncie to Anderson, the west side of Muncie, to the east side of Anderson, along the river. Our vision for the Greenway is twofold: to protect one of the most ecologically unique and high-quality free-flowing rivers in Indiana, and to create a premier greenway for the Midwest. It's not an original idea. As far back as 1979, the Indiana Department of Natural Resources studied the recreation potential of the White River between Anderson and Muncie and found that this was an area of great potential to create a linear conservation area between the two cities, along with some conservation nodes, that there were high-quality natural resources here, as well as this area being underserved in terms of outdoor recreational properties. This is a more detailed map of the Mounds Greenway proposal, and I'm going to take you along the corridor here with a little bit more detail about its location and features. And all of this information that I'm presenting tonight, along with the maps, are available on our website at moundsgreenway.org. On the going downstream, following the natural flow of the river, the Mounds Greenway would start at the west side of Muncie, connecting with the existing White River Greenway in Muncie. Then flow through Yorktown past their Morrow's Meadows Park, past the Schelleberger Park in Daleville, past the Walbridge Acres Park in Chesterfield, past Mounds State Park and the great natural resources and historic resources that are found there. Oh, there's Mounds. And then connect up with the existing trails in Anderson, the city trails, including their greenway along the White River. A little bit more detail about what the Greenway would accomplish. And first and foremost, the Mounds Greenway proposal is a land and water conservation plan. And so at its core, it preserves a free-flowing White River as it is now. It would also preserve the existing forests and wetlands along the river corridor, which we estimated about 2,300 acres. This is generally following the river's floodway between Muncie and Anderson, an area that's already pretty much undeveloped and heavily wooded with natural wetlands interspersed along that corridor. By preserving these habitats along the river, be preserving very high-quality wildlife habitats and a migratory corridor along the waterway that is considered by most biologists to be a high conservation priority. As I mentioned, also, the Greenway plan would conserve the West Fork White River. This river is a state-level resource. It has been designated an outstanding river of Indiana Contains a high-quality warm water fishery with at least 57 fish species, according to a survey by the Indiana DNR. I think some surveys done by city folks in Muncie have found even more fish species there in Muncie. One of the common fish species in the river is a game species, smallmouth bass. Smallmouth bass are known for being pollution intolerant fish and are very highly sought after by anglers. Along with the conserving the existing natural areas, the wildlife habitats, and the forests and wetlands, other features of the Mounds Greenway would include protection of the existing parks along the river, the local parks that I mentioned earlier in Yorktown and Daleville and Chesterfield and Anderson also would protect and keep free of any adverse impacts Mounds State Park and the very unique Mounds Fen natural area. It would provide access sites. It'd be like a park, most any type of recreational park, and it may include picnic areas, campgrounds, more river access sites, and we've also, with our partners, talked about the idea of a White River Interpretive Center. They're connected with the Rangeline facility to provide education about the White River Valley and all the resources and history that's here. Along with those conservation purposes of the Greenway, it's also about making connections and providing access to other places and to the places along the river and between Muncie and Anderson. And so we've proposed a trail along the Greenway from Muncie to Anderson, but first I wanted to mention another feature of the White River as in terms of connections is that it's a state-designated Indiana canoe trail. But the Greenway, as I mentioned earlier, would connect the existing trails in the city of Anderson. That's the map that you see on the screen now. Their trails along both the main stem of the White River and going up Killbuck Creek, which now run out to Rangeline Park. So the trail system, the Mounds Greenway Trail, would connect there at Rangeline Park and head along the river and end up connecting to the west side of Muncie, where the White River Greenway in Muncie ends. And by making that connection to the White River Greenway in Muncie, then this trail system would connect up with the Cardinal Greenway, which, as you can see from this map, runs from Marion through Muncie to Richmond, a 62-mile trail. So you get a very significant, regionally significant system of trail connections by linking the Anderson and Muncie trails, and by our calculations, including the Cardinal Greenway, it would be over 109 miles of trails with the potential to connect other trails as well in the future. Now I want to move to talk about some of the communities that are seeing their rivers and their river valleys as ways to revitalize their communities, some of them not unlike Anderson and Muncie, old manufacturing communities which have been hard hit by the loss of those manufacturing jobs, and this concept of trail towns and how so many communities around the country are capitalizing on the presence of rivers and the opportunity for trails along those rivers, trails and Greenway type parks. So I'll give you a couple examples of these communities around the country that are doing this. In the state of New York, there's the Mohawk River Waterfront Revitalization Plan. This covers the river all through Schenectady County in New York. There are 4 towns and 1 city, the city of Schenectady, are involved in this program. And you can see the type of outcomes that they're looking for in revisioning their river and their communities along the river in terms of providing more recreation, promoting historic sites and tourism, recreation along the rivers, and preserving the water resources and the habitats along those waterways. Next one is the Susquehanna Greenway, which is in Pennsylvania, and the Susquehanna Greenway runs for many miles along the river, encompasses many communities along the river, and has similar goals in their River Towns Challenge to challenge these towns along the river to use the river and the Greenway as a way to revitalize their communities. Then moving to Wisconsin, the Root River in Racine, Wisconsin. Racine is not unlike Anderson and Muncie in having a strong manufacturing background. And again, here's a plan that's focused on industrial redevelopment, but also celebrating the river and restoring the river and using the river to help stimulate new growth and improve the quality of life and the sense of place in Racine, Wisconsin. Another one that I'll point out is in Memphis and western Tennessee, the Wolf River Greenway Trail. This is a fairly new Greenway trail that's just getting underway. Eventually it'll be a 36-mile trail and linking Memphis, downtown Memphis, to a couple of small communities ending at Collierville, Tennessee. And again, with similar goals of restoring and bringing people back to their river, to the Wolf River, and using that restoration and that attention to the river to encourage economic development. Some more specific examples of benefits for greenways and the categories of benefits from greenways that we've been talking about in these vision plans for other places. Outdoor recreation and tourism, quality of life, enhanced property values, flood control, and healthier people. And I'll run through those here very quickly. Flood control, right now the White River here between Anderson and Muncie, by having an undeveloped floodplain, is providing natural flood control. An example of a greenway project in Missouri that is helping reduce flood damages there along the Merrimack River is providing a benefit of about $7.7 million a year in annual avoided flood damages. Let's talk about quality of life. A survey of millennials and active baby boomers by the American Planning Association found that these folks believe that quality of life features are more important in people deciding where to live and work than traditional business recruitment strategies, which is a trend that you'll see here as in other plans and studies that have been done elsewhere. Real estate benefits, in terms of real estate values, the National Association of Realtors found that availability of places to take walks was the second most important factor for people that they surveyed in deciding where to live. The National Association of Home Builders looked at community features that people look at when they're deciding where to live, and walking and jogging trails and park areas were the top two features identified by at least half of the home buyers. And then the increased property values lead to more property tax revenue for local government, which you see here from the benefits to Austin, Texas, from a greenway project there. Now to quickly go through some specific outdoor recreation benefits. In Indiana, outdoor recreation is big business. Over 1 million trail users, over 1 million bicyclists, nearly 600,000 non-motorized water recreation users, over 700,000 people that fish, and over 1.5 million people who watch wildlife, like this fellow with the bird on his hat. More statistics from the Outdoor Industry Association. Statewide, outdoor recreation generates over $9 billion in consumer spending and contributes to over $100,000 or 100,000 Hoosier jobs. Greenways are important for physical health, as the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention tells us. And they also tell us that Indiana is very underserved in terms of the population who lives within 1/2 mile of a park area in the state of Indiana. Now, quickly, some specific communities that benefit, that have examined the benefits of their greenways and trails. Lanesboro, Minnesota, the Root River Trail that led to a lot of new small business creation in that community and brings in about $5 million a year. The Virginia Creeper Trail in Southwest Virginia, again, generates a lot of annual visitor spending by visitors. The Big Four Bridge here, closer to home, a new pedestrian and bicycling bridge over the Ohio River between Louisville and Jeffersonville that connects to the Ohio River Greenway and was recognized as a great quality of life project by the Indiana Association of Cities and Towns. I've got a few more slides of these, but I could go on and on about the positive impacts of these greenway and trail projects and river park projects around the country. And I know I'm running short on time, so I'll skip through these pretty quickly. Wanted to point out the Great Allegheny Passage in Pennsylvania, where almost 1/3 of business revenues for businesses along the trail are coming from or attributed to the trail's presence. In Iowa, they looked at economic contributions of river recreation and found very substantial benefits from that. Some quotes about preserving greenways and trails and the value of those. Indianapolis Star calling the Monon Trail the equivalent of beachfront property in Indianapolis. Of course, they don't have an ocean there, so. Entrepreneurial opportunities from greenways and trails, bike shops and coffee shops and restaurants and canoe and kayaking outfitters are some of those opportunities. In downtown Jeffersonville, Flat 12, the Indianapolis Craft Brewery just opened a new place on the waterfront there. And then manufacturing. A regional plan for this area indicates that a way to bring employers and young professionals to this region is to create a regional greenway and water trail network, not dissimilar to the proposed Mounds Greenway. And then Volkswagen of America chose Chattanooga, Tennessee to build a new LEED certified auto plant there because of Chattanooga's approach to creating a clean and healthy city and creating the Tennessee Water Park. So in the future, if the Mounds Greenway happens, and we certainly hope it will, we could envision the Greenway extending on down the river from Anderson through Hamilton County, through Indianapolis, and to Muncie. Here's a list of our Greenway supporters so far, led by Heart of the River, whose folks helped us envision the Mounds Greenway idea. We're continuing to recruit more supporters. And just to wrap up, if you think the Mounds Greenway is a good idea, please join us in supporting it. First of all, by contacting Governor Pence and urge him to support the Greenway plan, and your local officials in Anderson and Madison County and Delaware County and the towns in between, and urge them to also work with us to help start planning the Mounds Greenway instead of the reservoir. Please be clear of the distinction here. The examples I talked about all across the country in these river revitalization projects, they depended on protecting and conserving that central natural resource, and the Mounds Reservoir instead would provide its alleged benefits by destroying that resource instead. So hope you'll join us in supporting this. Thank you.